Well, we'll just start with pretty easy opening. Just tell us why you decided to run for school board, what got you motivated to enter the race, and then also, if you could, just tell us what you believe the role of a school board member is. And we'll start over here.
Sure.
I just want to say one thing in terms of ground rules. If you guys say anything and anyone wants to rebut, just wait till the end. Each person has had a chance, and then we can give you an opportunity to say anything else that you'd like to add based on someone's comments.
Sure. Can I ask you to please repeat the question just
Sure.
so I have the full context of it?
Yeah, just start by giving us your name
Sure.
and most importantly then why you decided to run for school board, and also then segue into what you think the role of the school board member is.
Sure. My name is Chet Liew. I decided to run for school board distinctly because, I mean, on a macro scale, I'm not happy with the way things are going in the country. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of the polarization is just not being addressed. I think a way to provide a more worldly view for our students here in the Ben LaPlante School District is really to engage the students into providing more opportunity. So I think it's a chance to drive the board and the district in a way that I think gives us more empathetic students that are more understanding of the broader world around them. I think just living in Central Oregon, it's a bit of an island, and as it is getting more diverse, I think it's important to have representation and proactive, just a willingness to look at different ways of doing things to bring in more culture, more worldly views to the students.
Great. And Chet, real briefly, what's your background?
Sure. I have been in technology for the better part of 2 decades. I'm currently working as a IT solutions architect with TDS Telecommunications. It's the mothership of Ben Broadband.
Yeah.
So what I do, and I explained last night, is when the business wants to offer new products and services, I figure out what has to happen from a process perspective and how that translates into computer systems to serve our customers. Educationally, I did my bachelor's degree at UCLA, have a degree in molecular genetics and classical civilizations, and then I did my master's through the University of Oregon Business School.
Great.
Yeah.
I'm Caroline Skidmore. I'm a speech language pathologist for kids. I've worked for an education service district which provides special education services or the school district contracts out with an ESD for their special education services. I've also worked in a nonprofit, and like I said, I have a private practice now here in Bend for 17 years. I'm running because through my professional experience working with kids, a lot of the kids I work with have more significant delays and disabilities other than just speech. So working with them and seeing the challenges that arise in our school district with meeting the needs of all our kids, and also through my experience with my own kids. My kids have been in our school district since kindergarten, and they're now in high school and graduating 8th grade. So I've spent a lot of time volunteering in their classrooms. I'm on the advisory council for Cascade Middle School, and just being in the classroom has given me some important insight as to what it looks like. And the thing that I see the most and I hear the most when I talk to students and teachers is that our classrooms are overcrowded. We're seeing more and more kids with pretty significant trauma and adverse childhood experiences coming into our classrooms, and their mental health needs are not getting met. So we're seeing disrupted classrooms, and that really doesn't help anybody. So really what I'm seeing is that, when I look at the teachers and when they were at that Ways and Means Committee meeting, holding up signs saying classrooms in crisis, I've seen it firsthand, and it's certainly concerning, and I want to be a part of the solution. We've got a lot of work to do, but I want to be a member so I can collaborate with other members of the board, talk to teachers, talk to students, find out exactly what needs to happen so we can make improvements. to answer your question about the role of the school board, we obviously make policy, we oversee the superintendent, but I also see a major role that we have is to collaborate, not only with each other, the board members, but also with teachers, with students, to advocate for our students, to advocate for our teachers. Funding is obviously a big issue. I think a school board member has a responsibility to advocate for appropriate funding and then also make sure that those funds are allocated appropriately.
Great.
My name is Mark Capelle. My background, I own a computer service company, CMIT Solutions. I've had that for 17 years. Prior to that, I spent 10 years at American Airlines in sales management and planning, and 4 years at Sprint in business marketing. My family's from Bend, so we've been here over 100 years. I spent 8 years on the city council, which gave me a lot of experience in public safety and infrastructure, which I think will be beneficial on the school board, because I think those are two big key components of the school district. The reason I'm running is, first off, from a personal standpoint, I enjoyed my time on the city council. I like being involved. I like contributing to the community. And so I'm doing that for myself personally, from a, what I think I can contribute and why I think I would be good doing it is I care a lot about our community. I want to see it improve. I think if you look at what the functions of government are, it's public safety, infrastructure, and education. I've worked quite a bit in public safety and infrastructure, as I said, and the education side, I think, is probably one of the more critical components, because for the long-term quality of life of our community, we need to have kids growing up with a good, solid education and become good citizens. So I think it's a place I can contribute quite a bit. I think that the biggest issue that I want to tackle at the schools is funding. I think if we continue to just rely on the state for our operational funding, I think we're going to continue to have problems. As Caroline said, the size of the classrooms, the number of students, the kids with troubles, we can't really help them when you've got a single teacher with 32 or 33 kids. That's a pretty tough thing to fix. I was involved in the fire department when we went out to the citizens and said, our response times are not acceptable and we need funding to fix it. And we described it in a way that the citizens understood and supported. Response times from the fire department have dropped almost in half, and people's lives are being saved. And then it got reapproved the second time. I think we need to go out to the citizens and say, okay, here are the issues at the school. Here are some concrete things we can do. For instance, at such and such a school, we want to add X number of teachers, and here's what it's going to cost. And as a community, do we want to support that?
Great.
So from both of you, I didn't really get to hear what do you believe the role of the school board is.
Sorry.
Can we start back with Chet?
Sure. I have this 3-pillar platform I call the C strategy. It's all around the idea of that financial concept of a rising tide raises all boats. But the investment in that tide is not just, as Mark said, coming from Salem. The S, I believe that you need to guarantee safe schools, and that includes everything from anti-bullying to literally safe from violence. The E is for equality. That's to access, or guarantee equal access to all the programs. For instance, I've talked about how certain schools just have the ability for parents to be able to provide more volunteer time or financial resources for certain programs, and I firmly believe that whether it's in Lapine, the east side or the west side, all students should have access to the same types of opportunities. And the A in the C is access, and specifically access to technology. I've been a technologist for 20 plus years, and I think that there are ways we can use technology to improve the outcomes both at the district level and with students and faculty. So I think those three things, safety, equality, and access, are things that we as board members, those are our primary responsibilities to guarantee for all members of the school district, including the students, the administrators, the teachers, and the parents.
So I think the role of the school board is to work to improve the education of our kids. It's that simple and that complex, unfortunately. It is, technically it's a policy board, but I think the key to a good school board is members who are actively involved and going to the schools and talking to kids and talking to teachers and talking to administrators and looking for ways to make improvements. I think, as I said earlier, the budget issues are probably one of the critical ones, and I think we need to have a lot of discussions to try and figure out what's the best approach on that.
Okay. Well, speaking of funding, PERS is obviously the biggest challenge to school district budgets. While I realize that you, as board members, you will not have actual ability to legislate around PERS, one of the roles that we see as a school board is that you're an advocate for education. So I'd just like to hear what your philosophy is regarding PERS and what you think the state should do. And Karen, we'll start with you.
Sure. So regarding PERS, I think it's important that we really make distinguish the different tiers of PERS. So we've got our tier 1s, our tier 2s, and our tier 3s, which are tier 2 and tier 3 are our current teachers. Where we're seeing our biggest budget shortfall is with our tier 1. But it's important to note that this was a commitment made to our public employees who are providing a vital service to our community, which is educating our kids. We made that promise, the tier 1 promise, and that's the biggest budget strain right now. We made that promise to them in lieu of a pay increase, and this is part of their compensation for the work that they're doing for our community and for our kids. I was looking at the PERS website, and I actually brought the form I can show you later, but there's this myth out there that these public employees, especially teachers, are making $10,000 a month on their retirement, and they're not. They are being compensated for the work that they did. And my view on that is that all Oregonians need to come together to fix the problem. We need to definitely stop kicking the can down the road, so to speak. But I don't want to see it fall on the backs of our teachers, and that's what feels like is happening at this point. We've already made adjustments to our tier 2 and tier 3 public employees, and so essentially in a nutshell, I just want to stress that it shouldn't fall on the back of our teachers to fix the problem. It was an obligation that we made, and it's our obligation to fulfill that as all Oregonians to come together and figure out a solution and again, not keep kicking the can down the road. But I think as a collective community, we need to figure it out and not have it fall as a burden to our current teachers.
Okay. Mark?
Well, PERS was an issue when I was on the city council. It's money right off the top of the budget that you don't really have a choice. It's an obligation we've committed to, and we need to keep paying what we've obligated ourselves for. Like my car payment and my house payment, those things get paid before I have discretionary funds. And unfortunately, the way this is set up, those are the obligations, and the discretionary funds are what really impacts the kids. And so we need to keep paying it. We don't have a choice. It's what we've agreed to do. I think the role on the school board that I see from it is to continue to advocate with our representatives and at the state to try and find a solution. But honestly, I guess I've been involved in my time on the city. I guess I'm jaded just enough to say I doubt if I'll see a solution come out of our state legislature in my lifetime. They don't seem to have the political will to go after it. I think we have to come up with other funding solutions to solve not only the PERS problem, but the entire budget problem.
But you do feel that the state should honor the obligations they've made, rather than go back and adjust those obligations?
I think integrity is something we want to teach our kids. And if we can't show integrity in the way we manage our business, then we're not setting a good example.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with what's been already said. As to whether or not I think these could be renegotiated, I think that's a really difficult question, but it at least needs to be considered. I have a sister who's been a lifelong teacher. You know, my best man at my wedding's a teacher. I understand that they do work, as you said, far more than they're compensated for. But it really is a question as a society, as a state, as a county, and a school district. If we want to really do what's in the best interest for our students, we need to look at all options. And whether it's voluntary, you know, I don't. You know, I can't speak for the financial state of any of our retired public employees, but you know, I would have to think that there probably are some of them that would be open to the idea. Failing that, I fully support the day of action and the taxes that may come in this legislative session to help close some of that funding gap. And to Mark's point, I think that the funding has to be augmented by our own community here in Bend Pine. It's the whole idea that what the investment that goes in the seed is not we can't depend on a single source of funding. And I think that if we can create common goals and outcomes that we want to see out of our public school students here in this school district, then that could open up the opportunity to have revenue or income come in for our students that wouldn't affect the ones who have served and, you know, are entitled to what has been negotiated previously.
So just as a follow-up, and Chet, I'll start with you.
Sure.
I mean, both of you have mentioned getting additional funds locally. To be more specific, I mean, we just had a bond. Are you implying that you would, as a school board member, advocate for going out to the community on a pretty quick turnaround, or is this lofty and aspirational? And
also to clarify, I mean, it's my understanding the bonds are not for operation costs, so I'm curious what you were alluding to. It sounded like something to do operations, so you can enlighten me perhaps if you have.
Happy.
Yeah. So let's chat.
Sure. I don't see it as a bond issue, and I don't see it necessarily as a dollars issue completely. I think we have an amazing community here of, you know, technology companies, retail companies like Les Schwab, healthcare institutions like St. Charles, even though they have their own financial challenges right now. But I think the resources to give our children better opportunities and produce outcomes, a lot of that resides in our community, and a lot of that comes from communicating and agreeing to common vision and getting more buy-in from the community. So to answer your question directly, I'm not proposing that we go and put a bond measure out on the ballot immediately, but I'd like to see proactive engagement with partnerships with organizations in the community to see how we can potentially cover some of the shortfall through in-kind giving and volunteer work.
And I think it's a state issue, so I would disagree. And I really support the Student Success Act, because what that is going to do is that is going to provide a commercial activities tax. And I know nobody likes to hear that word, but this would provide revenue for our state to go to help with PERS, and if all all our education funding, but a portion of that, of course, would go to PERS. So the Student Success Act is going to put a tax on businesses that are making, I believe it's over $1 million profit per year. So unfortunately, like I said, nobody likes taxes, but I feel like we all have to pitch in here, and that includes big businesses in our state that are benefiting from our education system that provides them with students who come out prepared and ready to join the workforce. So I think that's a great solution that we've got on the table, and again, I think it's a state issue, and that's where we need to look for the revenue.
Mark?
I disagree. I think we get the majority of our funding from the state, but I think if we look to the state to fix our problems, we're gonna lose. I think you're correct. The bonds are for infrastructure, not for operating costs. And I think in the month or two that I've been talking to people about being on the board, I've brought this up almost every day, and I haven't had anybody say that we shouldn't have a conversation about, do the citizens of Bend Pine School District want to throw in more money to make it the way we want it, rather than waiting to see if the state will make it the way they think it should be. It's like what we did on the fire department. It's like what we did on the roads, the GO bond that we did, half a dozen years ago, or 8 years ago. On that bond, we went out and we said, now that's a bond, not operating, but we went out and we said, okay, we're going to do these 5 projects with this money, and do you want to spend that? And I think from an education perspective, we need to go out with very specific, we want to do these 10 things or these 30 things, and these are what they cost, and it's going to be this many teachers at this school and this many counselors and this many whatever. It's going to take some time to put together what do we think the needs are that we think the community would support, and then ask them if they want to do it. The worst case scenario, they say no, and we're back to where we are today. The best case scenario, they say yes, and we improve the education of our kids. I think it's what most people don't want to talk about, and what people getting into politics don't really like to talk about, like, let's no new taxes kind of thing.
Right.
I guess I'm not a very good politician. I just look at it and say, what's the issue and how do we fix it? And I think relying on Salem is a mistake.
Do you think, and your timeline, you think would be 1 to 2 years?
Probably take a year or two it'd probably take a year to figure out, and then 6 months for a conversation.
Okay.
So I'm just still not clear, is there a function beyond bonds that you can?
Operating levies, like what we did for the fire department.
Okay.
So at the fire department, we went out and we said, we want to add this many positions,
Okay.
and here's what it's going to cost, and we believe it'll bring down the response time by this, and do you want to pay for it? And I think it's a very similar question for the schools.
Can I add something to that? I agree with Mark as far as levies and local ideas to get revenue for our schools, but I just don't think that that's going to be the solution to PERS. So I think getting local money to improve our schools is certainly an option, but I think PERS is a pretty significant issue that we're looking at, and then I think that money needs to be something that comes from Salem.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to solve PERS with it. I'm trying to solve the overall staffing and student-teacher ratio with it.
Right, but they're all tied together, you've got a
They are all
budget that
tied
has to
together.
pay it out, so,
Right. Yep.
Do you have any additional thoughts on that?
Just that, I've always been, I would gladly pay the tax if the results are delivered and there's accountability and transparency in how the money's spent, and it's not sold to me as a $10 million problem and end up costing $25 million. So I think, in alignment with Mark, that would be a huge part of that 6 months and then the year to have the discussion. I think it's fairly accurate, because convincing the community that we have our students' best interest in mind is going to be a difficult thing to do, I think.
I spent a day in a kindergarten class and was, shocked is the only thing I can say. I mean, 30 plus kids with one teacher and kids with a variety of levels of where they come to that school from. Some of them could read and count, and some of them couldn't put their shirt on or tie their shoes. And how does a teacher that's one person with 32 of those kids, how do they really help them? You know, they end up spending a lot of their time with the kids that have issues, and the kids that their parents got them a head start are left behind and or left on their own. And you know, that's at that level, that's not adequate staffing. And the first few years are critical in the success of their entire education, and we're, I think, doing it badly.
To your point about the accountability
Sure.
piece, what would the outcomes you'd be looking for in terms of accountability? Is it just graduation rates or other things that you?
I mean, obviously graduation rates is kind of the end goal, but I'd like for us to be accountable for that type of outlay at all grade levels. Representation, you know, not everyone's a fan of test scorings, but obviously I'd like to see improvements across the board. I'd like to see improvements across the demographics at our school, more teachers, better ratios.
Some high schools in the district offer daycare centers, but the health centers in the schools do not currently offer contraception, as is the norm in a lot of other districts in the state. What's your stance on contraception or contraception education in your district? And I think, where am I at? Carolyn, it starts with you because I followed
Okay.
it.
I definitely support contraception or sex education that includes information and contraception to students that need it or require it. I think we need to look, or ask for it, I think we need to look at empirical based information when it comes to sex education. And what the research shows is that students who are taught about contraception are less likely to end up having teen pregnancies. It reduces the rates of STDs. So I'm all for science-based sex education, and that includes providing students with contraception.
I'm a fan of sex education and contraception. I think if we put our head in the sand, we're just asking for issues and gonna have kids that are having more problems with their education because they've got other issues going on in their life. And I think we need to help the kids. And I think to say, well, they're not gonna need that until they're off to college is naive and just not a good approach. I think we need to take care of the kids.
Yeah, I agree as well. Support science-based sex education. I have no problem with contraception being taught as part of that curriculum. I think it's, you know, it's one of those things that we just have to remove the taboo or the not, let's not talk about this and it won't happen type of opinion. And I fully support it.
It's been our understanding that this was a board decision in the past to not offer this. So I'm just curious, as you know, there's going to be quite a change on the board this year, if this would be something that any of you would be willing to actually champion or discuss and not just talk about it philosophically in this room. So
I would say definitely. And from what I've heard is that the board has really kind of given each school the ability to make those decisions, whether or not contraception is going to be provided, especially like in the health centers that are next to the schools. There's one in Bend High and one in Lapine. So yeah, and that's something that I want to see more of from our board is district-wide policies, and providing contraception to students is one of them that I would certainly champion, because I think it's impactful, and I know that it reduces teen pregnancies, and I know that it reduces STDs, and I think an important piece of that too is to talk to students about consent and really provide a robust sex education curriculum. I mean, talking to my middle schooler, and he tells me some of the information that he's getting, and he lets me know, Mom, this is totally outdated. They're teaching us information that's outdated, and so I want us to, I guess, get more in current times with our sex education, talking about consent, talking about gender identity, talking to kids about LGBTQ students, and really make it more inclusive.
To answer your question, I don't have a problem bringing up issues in front of a board and trying to work with a board to get a consensus. It's something that's actually quite enjoyable to do.
Yeah, and I think I would frame it in an overall, self-value, self-help type of curriculum. I'd like to see more initiatives around just students being able to respect themselves and respect their peers, and of course, understanding sexual education and contraception and all the topics that we've brought up are absolutely critical parts, components of that.
I'll just add a little editorial comment to this part of the discussion, since you all three are in agreement on the issue. We have asked board members this question for many years now, and it continues to be something that is not available to students. So we'll just throw that out as I think it's our editorial position that we hope you are successful, whichever one of you wins, in actually making it happen, because the other school board members that we've talked to have been in agreement have not. The guns are a big topic of conversation in schools. I continue to be educated through this process on people's opinions one way or the other about access for students and teachers to firearms. I'd like to just open this conversation up to your personal opinions on arming teachers and what the relationship should be for the students to firearms. Mark, we'll start with you.
I'm strongly against arming teachers. I think we're just asking for issues if we do that. I don't want to see guns in the school regardless of who's carrying them. With regard to gun safety, I know there's some stuff in front of the legislature right now to try and improve some of the gun safety. I'm a fan of that. I think we need to make sure that people are adequately background checked before they have guns, and I think they need to be adequately trained in gun safety and in storage of the guns so that kids don't have access to them. I think it's a conversation we need to have with the parents of the students. We can't let it happen. It's like when I was on city council, there were half a dozen things that could have happened that I kept going, oh man, I hope this never happens, and somebody comes in front of council with something horrible. And I think from the school district, a gun incident in a school is going to be that one thing that we have to really strive to not let happen.
Okay.
I agree. I'm completely against arming teachers. I coach a lot of Ben Parks and Rec sports, and one of the things we do now is active shooter training. And you think about having 50 kids playing hockey, and if the blue light starts flashing, we're all supposed to run to the gates and ice skates. I think just the idea of that actually occurring is horrifying. That being said, I've shot guns. I've family and very good friends in law enforcement. I believe that people should have the right to own their firearms for hunting purposes or for sport purposes. I obviously don't believe that anyone needs an assault rifle or a high-capacity magazine. So I think, I'm a proponent of common sense gun laws, and as far as it pertains to school, I'm with Mark. I don't think more guns are a solution. But I think considering the area we live in and the fact that there are many people that do hunt and shoot for sport, I wouldn't be opposed to having programs in school about gun safety or trap shooting teams or competitive sports that include and show the students that these are parts of our society that people enjoy and have useful purposes for. They just shouldn't be an avenue of violence against each other.
Well, this is certainly an issue that's near and dear to my heart. I founded the Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense chapter here in Central Oregon about 6 years ago, and I'm on the Ben Lapine Gun Safety Coalition that works to prevent gun violence in our Ben Lapine schools. Certainly, I do not support teachers being armed at all. I think Chet brought up an important point that we do have the Second Amendment and people, law-abiding citizens, have the right to own guns, but we need strong background checks. We also need safe storage laws. One of the things that I've worked with the school board and had meetings with Chief Porter and Andy High and the superintendent is what I feel like our school district really needs to do. One of the missing pieces in our efforts to prevent gun violence in our schools is we have not communicated to parents the importance of locking up our firearms in homes to prevent a child from bringing a firearm to school. Also, to reduce the risk of teen suicide. Unlocked gun in the home greatly increases the risk of suicide, especially with teens. So that's something that I've already been working with the board on, is to actively message to parents the importance of securing firearms in homes. So that's one of my platforms, is prioritizing safe schools, and that not only involves the great work that the district has done with securing vestibules and putting up fences. Not sure fences are that effective, but not only do we need to secure schools, but we also need to improve our mental health services and actively message to parents the importance of locking up our firearms. So it's really a multifaceted approach if we're going to prioritize safe schools.
You brought up something I wanted to follow up with, which was the fencing issue, which I know some students have been dismayed to be fenced in during the day in their high school, and so it sounds like you're not in support of that as an option or as a safety measure.
I wouldn't go so far as to say I'm not in support of it. I just want to look into it further and see how effective that is. To me, it feels like, and I know that the students that I've spoken with feel the same, that they feel pretty trapped in there. Mm-hmm. And if there was a situation, they would be stuck. So I think it's something that needs to look into, that we need to look into further, whether or not it's effective.
Yeah, you
Ask
want
the
to
same
speak
of you
to
guys.
fencing?
I think this is an area where I think there are technology solutions out there. It's not an easy thing to do because you have to balance the implementation of technology with your personal rights. And it's, with candor, I could say that it's not something that I've spent enough time researching, but I would like, as part of that platform, that access to technology to look at potential solutions for securing our campuses and not making it feel like an airside part of an airport for our students. I don't think that's a conducive environment for them to learn in.
I haven't been out to see the fences that have gone up, so I don't know if I can really answer that well. But I think if enough people believe that it can improve the safety for the kids, I think we ought to seriously consider it and do it where we can.
Mm-hmm. So, if you hear that student perspective, that they feel trapped in there, is that, would that be a consideration for you, that they, then they're in there and they can't get out, is kind of their thoughts,
You can do fencing, there's a difference between how a fence looks to make it, to whether it's inviting or comfortable, or whether it's, looks like a chain link fence with barbed wire at the top, you just have to build it appropriately so that it's not something that's intimidating.
I'm pretty sure these are chain link.
Yeah, they're not good looking
Fences.
fences. I think.
But I like the idea of maybe like wire. fences.
Yeah, hot wire.
Yeah. We're running out of time, so a couple more questions.
Yeah, this hour always goes so fast.
Bullying, is another topic that is in communication with students quite a bit. What do you think is the role of the school board in bullying incidents within the school? What do you think your role would be as somebody on the board with regard to that issue?
And since we are running out of time, I would just add in there that, bullying or just targeting based on any protected class.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Mark, did I start with you last time? I think I'm losing track.
I've lost track as well.
Yep, Chet, we'll just go to you on that.
Sure. I think most kids are bullied at some point in their childhood. I know I was. I know my wife has been, and my kids have as well, and it continues. I mean, we talk about experiences that happened to us when we were in elementary school. I think the role of a school board member is really to be more transparent about the fact that it's happening. We talked about quite a bit about this last night at the Embrace Ben Forum. I don't think that students necessarily do it because they understand the long-term implications and how they affect the student they're bullying it. They're doing it out of some desire to have, I don't know, some visceral feeling to feel better about themselves or compensate for something else. I think as a school board member, it's principle that to our responsibilities to communicate that these incidents are happening. And whether that's through technology or some other form, I think we don't need to name specific names, but it's one of those things where I think that, even as a parent, sometimes you just want to go, it happened, let's talk about it, but, let's just drop it, ignore it, don't play with that kid. I think we need to have a sustained discussion in an open forum about these are the metrics that have happened. We've had this number of reported bullying incidents at these schools, and these are the trends. What are we going to do about it as a community?
So would you, just a quick follow, so communicating when it happens, and then would there be a messaging around that?
Absolutely.
Like a reminder or something,
Yeah, proactive reminders, invitations to discussions, and communication of resources. Hey, this happened at our school. These are the specifics around this particular incident, whether it's a protected class or just maybe something racially defined, which my children have had experience with. And here are some resources where you should talk to your kids about how to act in this environment. I think one of our counterparts last night running for COCC talked a lot about training for bystanders.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I hadn't thought about it, and I'm not taking credit for it in any way, shape, or form, but I thought that was a huge positive way to look at things.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk around that just after the max stabbings and whatnot.
So I look at it as prevention, and then what do we do about it when it happens? So as far as prevention, bystander training that Chet mentioned, certainly, and then also creating schools that have a culture of kindness and inclusivity, and that involves training for teachers, that involves teaching about diversity. There's some great programs that are already happening, like a group called Unity is doing Youth Challenge Day, which is an anti-bullying program. In the middle schools, only some schools able to get the funding, but I volunteered for it a couple of years ago, and it's really fantastic and really gives students some important insight. It talks about differences, and it was incredibly empowering for the students, so I'd like to see more of that as far as prevention goes. So just creating that culture of kindness within our schools, I think, is going to be really critical. And then as far as how to react when these situations happen, one of the things that I think is really powerful that's starting to happen in our high school is restorative justice. So instead of just suspending a kid, or the bully, and then they come back and nothing's changed, they haven't learned anything, but to sit down with the person who's doing the bullying and then the person who's been the victim of that and really have a discussion around it, really make it a learning experience, I think is going to be really critical. And then also finally, the thing that I've been hearing that is really needed is across the board policy about what we do about bullying, and then also specifically what the policy is when it's a racially motivated situation. So I think district-wide policy, again, is going to be just critical in a lot of these issues, and particularly with bullying.
So I think it's the board's responsibility to set strong policy to, so that there are guidelines of what we're going to do and everybody knows how we're going to handle it. I think we also are responsible for generating conversation about this and making sure people are aware. But I think we can put all kinds of programs in place, but if there isn't funding for the basic education, how do you add the funding for all of these other things that we would like to do that are the right thing to do in our community? And so I think this comes down to a funding issue as well. And I think having adequate staffing, if you've got enough students or teachers per student, you're going to have less bullying because there's more interaction with the teachers, and I think we can have a huge impact if we have the right staffing level.
Well, with our remaining time, if you could just take a couple minutes to just say anything we might have missed, or what it is that you feel is most important about yourself as a school board member. And Carolyn, will start with you.
Okay. One of the things that I was kind of thinking about and hoping that we would discuss is climate action. I've talked to a lot of students in our district that are really wanting the board to come up with a school-wide climate action resolution similar to what the city did. There's certainly a lot of sustainability things that we can do within our schools to make our schools more environmentally friendly, to act on climate change. And I'm hearing that students want that. On Fridays, there's a group of students that are out on the Peace Corner protesting, asking for action on climate change. And so I really think that we need to honor those voices, and along with the common sense gun laws, climate action is really something that I've advocated for. And I feel like we owe it to our kids to act on climate change, because really those are the ones that are going to be the most affected by this. So that's something I really wanted to highlight, that we need to listen to our kids, and if they want our schools to do more to act on climate change, we need to honor that. And then just to close, my 3 priorities are advocating for appropriate school funding. The second one is to prioritize safe schools, and I've gone into that with security, mental health services, and communicating to parents. And then the third thing is that we work together as a district to create schools that emphasize kindness and inclusivity, so all kids feel like they belong.
Mark?
I think the experience I have on the city council, working across both ends of the spectrum, I think are something that could be helpful for the school board. On council, I was politically a moderate, so I was kind of the out person. There was these people on the far left and the people on the far right, and what I found is I could work with both groups and we could get things accomplished. And I think I can add that to the school board. I think it is a critical component of the things that government does for our community, and it's one of those things that is critical to the quality of future life in Central Oregon, because we want kids that are kind and educated and make good decisions, and I think we need to help them do that. I think I can add to the school board. So, and the interesting kind of fun fact is my grandmother, I think, was the first elected woman to the school board. I want to say it was probably, I'd have to go back and look, but I want to say it was close to 60 years ago. And so it's in our family to care about the community, and I want to continue giving back.
Great. Chet?
Yeah, I think for me, it's around those three pillars of safety, equality, and access to technology. I think paramount to what I want to see is equal opportunity for all students within the school district. Much like Mark, I'm moderate in that I'm unaffiliated, but left-leaning. I think a lot of that polarization that happens, I don't see it as much in the school board as I think in the city council. But I think that turns off the community. And, similar to what I said earlier, I don't think that any parent or grandparent or teacher or administrator or company executive here in town can solve the challenges we have. But as a community, we should be able to, we should have the resources here and not, have any hindrances to providing equal opportunity for all the students. So I think that would be my main focus, making sure every kid has the same opportunity.
So quickly, because Caroline, you brought it up, and we also brought it up in our last round, because we did hear about the climate change resolution that students had brought. The BEA, I know, has signed it, and several high schools have signed it as council. So I'm just curious from the other two of you, if they bring it to the board, which is my understanding they will be soon, would it be something that you would support?
Absolutely. Trying to become a vegetarian.
Oh man, that's tough.
Yeah, but there are some really cool meatless Impossible Burger and things like that now. So I think it's important. We are leaving a huge burden on future generations, and I think we have, at least growing up in the capitalistic 80s and 90s, this scorch and burn type attitude about our resources, and very little consideration has been given to the next generations. And it's great to see people like Greta out there, speaking in front of the United Nations, and I would fully support the resolution.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Mark, you want to speak to it?
I think it's part of education. The kids need to be aware of it. We need to help them understand it. It's a fact of life, and whatever the schools can do to educate our kids so that they know that there's an issue we all need to work on, I think makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Well, again, thank you very much for taking the time to come talk with us today. I'm always in awe of people like yourselves who get out there and really sort of do these kind of interviews and put yourselves through this. So thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It's kind of fun.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
kind of fun.